Let's go to the next part here because this is like the perfect thing. As S&P 500 pops, as the tech sector continues to boom, NVIDIA earnings and all of that, there is a huge crisis for food affordability here in the United States. Best exemplified by the CEO of Kellogg, who is now pushing cereal for dinner as a way for cash-strapped families to feed themselves as they struggle in paying for the grocery store. Here's what he had to say.
The cereal category has always been quite affordable, and it tends to be a great destination when consumers are under pressure. So some of the things that we're doing is first messaging. We got to reach the consumer where they are. So we're advertising about cereal for dinner. If you think about the cost of cereal for a family versus what they might otherwise do, that's going to be much more affordable. The other places that we like to go is we talk about making sure we have the right pack at the right price in the right place. So having a different size pack that'll have a different price point, that'll take some pressure off the consumer while they're shopping. So those are some of the things that we're doing. But in general, the cereal category is a place that a lot of folks might come to because the price of a bowl of cereal with milk and with fruit is less than $1. So you can imagine why a consumer under pressure might find that to be a good place to go.
Right. I'm all for innovation and marketing, but the idea of having cereal for dinner, is there the potential for that to land the wrong way?
We don't think so. In fact, it's landing really well right now, Carl. When we look at all of our data, of course, we would know that breakfast cereal is the #1 choice for in-home consumption. We understand that for breakfast. It turns out that over 25% of our consumption is outside the breakfast occasion. A lot of it's at dinner, and that occasion continues to grow, as well as the snacking occasion. But cereal for dinner is something that is probably more on trend now, and we would expect to continue as that consumer is under pressure.
As that consumer is under pressure. Anyone else catch the palatial Florida arc? I could spot it from a mile away.
You think Gary's giving his kids cereal for dinner?
You see that palm
Don't
tree?
think so.
You see that palm tree in the background? Yeah, that's what a man who in the winter is fleeing south and has the ability to have second homes and to have nice little travel of the rest of us.
Yeah, I don't think Gary's eating Fruit Loops for dinner personally.
Right. Yeah, he's probably eating a fruit platter, that as dessert. Let's go and put this up there.
We wonder why we have an obesity crisis and a diabetes crisis in this country.
Just for everyone to know, you don't eat cereal for dinner.
I don't even want my kids eating cereal for breakfast.
No, I agree.
One of the most horrifying places in the entire grocery store is the cereal aisle.
Sure.
When you walk down the cereal aisle and you see like cookies in small form or like Sour Patch Kids cereal, I'm like, what did we do? Where did we go wrong as a country?
Well,
it makes me absolutely hate capitalism and people like this.
Let's put this up there on the screen just to kind of exemplify what he's talking about. Wall Street Journal has some great charts, the one that we have right there in front of you for those who are watching, that shows you that the spending share of disposable income on food is now at a 30-year high. This is especially important because it encompasses not just groceries, but also dining out. As people can see, we've actually been on a decade-long increase in price of dining out. Some of that is derivative of like higher cost options, but a lot of it also has to do with inputs. It plunged in 2020 as a result of the COVID pandemic, but quickly spiked to an all-time high there. Even in terms of for dining out, it's at very, very high. For groceries, what you could see, if you combine both all food and groceries, you could see that we're at the 3-decade high, and it's taking up far more of a percentage of Americans' income than in a very, very long time. As they say, too, quote, relief is not arriving soon. Restaurant and food company executives are still, quote, grappling with rising labor costs and some ingredients that are only getting more expensive, and consumers, they said, will find ways to cope. If you look historically after periods of inflation, there's really no period where you could point to where food prices go back down. They tend to be sticky, meaning this is here and it is very here to stay.
I guess those ways to cope include Fruit Loops for dinner.
Well, really what it is, and this is why it's sad, is if you look, it's the people who have disposable income, their consumption patterns have not changed.
Right.
They're eating the exact same out at dining. They're eating the exact same things at the grocery store. It is Denny's, Wendy's, and all other restaurant chains that are now telling their investors that their guest count has fallen precipitously throughout 2022 and 2023. Why? Because their customers are the ones who have lower incomes or for whom would, the occasional customer or somebody who's going to a lower cost option of these type of chain restaurants, their treat, quote unquote, is now gone. It's been cut out of the budget. So if you combine gas and cost of living and then grocery prices now replacing that, it's just taking a lot of enjoyment. Whatever little enjoyment was there at the lower end of the cost spectrum is going away. And that, I think that's actually the tragic situation. People in New York City are going out to eat. They're mostly fine. You know, at the higher end of the spectrum, yes, their prices have increased by 25%, but if you compare their overall wages and the disposable income that they have, they're just eating the cost. It's the people who can't afford to eat the cost where their quality of life, that goes down significantly when your food price goes up by 25, 30%.
Yeah, it's the people who are working in those restaurants who can no longer afford to, you know, to eat out even somewhere modest like a Wendy's or a Denny's at this point. And Jeff Stein actually had a good piece a while back. We talked to him a little bit, but just as a reminder of why grocery prices continue to be so high. You can put this up on the screen. You know, he really dives in. Jeff does a great job with this stuff. His headline here is "Inflation has fallen. Why are groceries still so expensive?" He's also been visiting food pantries who, across the board, are reporting that demand for food pantry and food aid is at, you know, record highs and continues to grow. So there's clearly a lot of struggle among the working poor, the working class, and the out-and-out poor that is reflected in those numbers. But he tracks, it's a lot of different factors. I think what you pointed to, Saagar, the fact that, you know, when food prices go up, what grocery store or what Kellogg's brand CEO is going to say, you know what, I can afford to bring it back down. They're not going to do that because they're greedy. They're just going to eat up the extra profit margin. And that is part of what is going on here. There's actually a White House Council of Economic Advisors report that found that grocery store profit margins are higher than their pre-pandemic levels. That means they're gouging you. That means prices could be lower, but instead of lowering prices for consumers, they're just going to keep them where they are because they can justify it because prices have been high, and they're going to suck up the extra profit. That's part of it. There have also been so many climate disasters that have upended a lot of food production. So that has factored in. You've continued to have some supply chain disruptions, even post-pandemic. The fallout from that continues to reverberate. So that's part of it. So there's a lot that goes into it. But one of those pieces continues to be effectively greedflation. One other thing he points out is a group called the Groundwork Collaborative, which is a left-leaning think tank. They found that a lot of the rise in grocery prices, about 30%, is focused in 5 categories of food that are particularly vulnerable to supply chain shocks. That includes beef, chicken, fruits, vegetables, and snacks. So a lot of the sort of, you know, the core, like the things you actually want to feed your family, not Fruit Loops, are some of the things that have been the most vulnerable to supply chain shocks and have contributed to continued high prices there. And people wonder why people still don't feel great about the economy, why they're still struggling, why they're still, you know, giving Joe Biden a very low approval rating. I think part of it is just because they have no confidence in him. Even when things do get better, they have no confidence that he had anything to do with it or that he could continue the trend and trajectory given his, you know, his age and his limited capabilities. But in addition, you still have numbers like this that show people are really struggling even just to be able to feed themselves and feed their families, let alone provide any of those like little bonus luxuries that make life
And this
nice.
is so obvious to me because they're like, Krystal, but didn't you know that inflation slowed from 9 to 3 this quarter? I'm like, guys, that's not how people experience inflation.
Yeah,
they go to the
that's so
grocery store,
true.
they're like, why is this 30% more expensive than 5 years ago? And then they're like, oh, guess we're not going to Denny's on Sunday like we usually used to, or, you know, after we meet up after whatever. I mean, and that's one of those where, or, you know, you pack lunch for your kids or you pack lunch for them as you're going on a road trip, even though in the past you might have been like, maybe we'll stop somewhere. And it's not fun. It's not nice. You know, it removes a lot of the spontaneity in life. People at the higher income spectrum, they are totally capable of absorbing that cost. People who are not, when you really have to think, you know, that is what really inhibits a lot of the enjoyment for a lot of people. And I think that's, you know, really devastating for people. And it's why, you know, they're not just going to take these explanations about Build Back Better or whatever seriously. I don't think they should. Let's put this finally up here just to show you about, again, how devastating some of these numbers can be. American credit card debt, this is just from a few days ago, has now hit a record $1.13 trillion. Credit card debt has increased actually by $50 billion just in the fourth quarter of 2023. A lot of that is holiday spending. And they show that it's actually a 5% increase just from the previous quarter in the number of debt that's been accumulated. The data currently shows that you've risen a total of $212 billion just in the fourth quarter of 2023. And, you know, if you look at the quarterly report on household debt and credit, Americans are strapped more than, frankly, they ever really have been in the past. The other issue is that the delinquencies across all age groups, people who are unable to pay them or missing payments, are actually high across all of them. Borrowers, it says, in particular between the ages of 30 and 39, are missing their payments at especially fast rates. That's also very devastating because those are the exact people who, that's the age when you are supposed to be thinking about being able to buy a house, start a family, any of those. And if you are in a mountain of credit card debt, you may put off those decisions. It's one of those where it's really sad. You know, just to give away some of my trashy television taste, I was watching one of these episodes of Love is Blind, latest season. I love the franchise. And
you and my daughter got me into that show.
It's a great show.
It is really great.
Shout out to Nick Thompson from season 2, who is a fan of this show, by the way. But there's a sad conversation that's happening between two. I'm not going to give away too much of it or who they are, where they're like, well, you know, he's like, I really want to retire. I really want to be frugal. You know, if we have a kid, you know, I'm not so sure that that's what he's like obsessed with the idea of not accidentally having a child in the next 5 years. And he's purely talking about it from money perspective because he's like, I grew up in a very poor household and I was not provided, you know, X, Y, and Z. He's like, I will not do that. You can see the emotion. It's causing some relationship tension. And I was watching him like, this is terrible. You know, it's one of those where this guy is like, frankly, torpedoing a relationship because he's so afraid of having a child accidentally and not being able to afford it because he did not have a good upbringing himself. I mean, look, you call it responsible or whatever, but for me, I'm like, that is just a perfect example of like how these macroeconomic conditions have huge impacts on people's lives that they may not even connect to something bigger.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And that sense of precarity, that stress that comes from having to count every penny, you know, and really like live day to day and dollar to dollar. The way that weighs on your entire life is, you know, it's a very difficult thing. And people are not wrong to feel like Joe Biden, I mean, he's not even promising anything in the next, what's his economic plan going forward? He doesn't have one. Hasn't announced anything, any goals, you know, for the next term were he to get reelected. So people aren't wrong and they're not crazy to feel like even though many of the economic numbers have improved, you know, unemployment is low, wages are going up. Certainly the stock market is doing just fine, as we were just discussing. Yes. But that isn't the totality of how people are experiencing the economy, and they're not crazy to look at their day-to-day reality and say, this is not working for me, and I don't have hope that it's gonna work for me or my kids for the future either.
Absolutely right.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right, we're subscriber funded, we're building something new. We wanna replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.